Welcome to Museums and Change, and thank you all for joining us today. Special thanks to Greg Stevens, who will discuss ways in which we can further careers in museums, even in turbulent times. Oddly, despite a long career in and with museums, I have few thoughts on the subject. One is that establishing and maintaining relationships with colleagues and peers can be a critical factor in career development. Despite advances in digital recording, and selection, word of mouth still carries weight. My other thought is the regular reflection on one's work, on one's ambitions, and on museum practice more generally can be helpful in setting clear, informed directions. A few housekeeping details. We are being recorded. We'll make a link available via the AAM open forum as soon as possible. Unless you are recognized to speak, please hit your mute button so we don't get noise pollution during the session. If you want or need captioning, activate captions on your Zoom dashboard. If you want to share a question or comment, please use the raised hand signal. They will go into a queue and I will recognize you as quickly as possible. Do use the chat function to make comments, pose questions, enter citations of relevant literature, and so on. That way we can manage a second parallel conversation. If you want to be added to our email list to receive direct notices of future sessions, please enter your name and email address in the chat function or write to me directly via email. We'll happily add you to our list. Our next session will convene on October 23rd, when Tori Bell will present on bridging the diploma divide in American museums. Please join us then. I'm speaking to you from Philadelphia, where I live on the ancestral lands of the Lenni Lenape and where the Lenni Lenape still reside. I believe it is our responsibility to learn about the indigenous peoples who lived here before us and to share our knowledge with our colleagues, constituents, and clients. Without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Greg Stevens.
Thanks, Avi, and thank you all for joining. As I'm watching people come in, it's very exciting to see a good handful of familiar names and familiar faces. So hi, Vanessa. Hi, Kristen. Hi, Amy. A whole bunch of other folks that I've known from earlier parts in my museum career and currently. So it's a pleasure to see those familiar faces and a whole bunch of new faces. As you know, this conversation that we're having today is really all about managing your museum careers, a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It's been part of my professional practice for many, many years, both in my role in professional development at AAM and more recently in my role as a career coach, working with a number of museum colleagues, but also colleagues from across other sectors, for profit, higher education, federal service. And so what I'm speaking to today is really from my perspective and my experience working with a number of clients across sectors, largely in the museum sector, and some of the challenges that I've observed taking place, some which will be very familiar to some of you folks, and some of what I might have to offer may be eye-opening or illuminating. As Avi suggested earlier, if you have comments or questions, please feel free to engage. I'm going to speak about a few key talking points, and then we're going to open up the second half of our program for further conversation and try to tackle your questions or comments as they come in at that point. I don't need to really start by saying too much more about how tumultuous the world is. I think we all live it and breathe it in various ways almost every day. Um, the one thing I would like to start by saying is that we are indeed in what is known as a VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That is an acronym that was coined back in the 1970s by the US Army as part of soldier training programs that were intended to help soldiers understand that the world that they would be stepping into was indeed volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I can think of no other acronym that better describes the world that we're in right now than a VUCA world. What does that mean for museum careers? It can mean a number of things depending on where you are in your career, where you are in your job, in your institution, in your city. Um, but the bottom line is that resilience and flexibility and adaptability are at the top of core competencies for anybody working in the museum field right now. So I just want to offer that as a bit of a framing device for other points that I want to make, so that you all are aware we're in this very complex, ambiguous world, and more than ever, we really need to be resilient, flexible, and adaptable. And that isn't just sort of a state of being for ourselves, but it's also making its way into the requirements of museum job postings, where flexibility and adaptability and resilience, problem solving, ability to pivot are coming to play in museum job postings pretty regularly, which signals to me, and as I have conversations with clients on a regular basis, there is no shortage of needing to pivot and be flexible and adaptable. And I'm probably preaching to the choir here for many of you, probably live and breathe flexibility and adaptability every day, whether it's project-based work or your day-to-day work or capital campaigns or whatever might be on your plate in your particular institution. It certainly comes into play if you find yourself currently in some kind of career transition, whether you are desperate to get out of your job for a variety of reasons, or find yourself having been displaced or separated from your employment, which a number of our colleagues are facing right now. Um, if you're actively looking, just getting started in your career, perhaps new in the museum field, right out of school or transitioning from another field, all kinds of variables come into play if you find yourself in career transition. And I think many of you already know it can be very frustrating. Um, the job search can be frustrating. The job market is pretty tight. Now more than ever. It always has been in the museum field, at least from my experience. So toughening up, right? That resilience and flexibility in your job search is critical as well. Um, Related to that is this idea of the stages of grief. And many of you may know of Kubler-Ross's studies on human response to life events, commonly called the stages of grief: denial, anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance, a whole range of stages that we often go through, not all at the same time or in the same way. We're human beings, we're very individual, but understanding where we are in those stages of grief and allowing ourselves to go through those, to be okay and give ourselves the grace, to be angry when we need to be angry, to be depressed when we need to be depressed, um, to come to resolution that things will ultimately be okay, but we have to get through it. Um, I can speak from my own personal experience, having had my position many years ago eliminated unceremoniously after 10 years, a job that I was fully committed to in an organization I was fully committed to. And I can tell you that I went through all the phases, sometimes cycled back through them over the weeks and the months that followed. Um, but I'm still standing or sitting, as the case may be. Um, I wanted to offer a reality check uh, for those of you who might be thinking about changing jobs or actively on a job hunt. The reality check is it's going to be about 3 to 6 months for you to find a job. And that's just the reality. If you think about just the down here on the ground, finding a job, putting your materials together, applying for a job, hopefully getting through the rounds of interviews and then onboarding, right there is a minimum of 3 months. So if you are one of the people who are actively looking right now, it's going to be a minimum of 3 months. Then you add on some other layers of the end of the year, the holidays. You start building into 4 or 5 months, which seems completely unreasonable, especially if you're the sole breadwinner for your household. But it is a bit of a reality check. Another reality check is what I call the 80-20 pie chart, right? So if you imagine a pie chart, and 20% of that pie, a small slice of that pie, that's the number of jobs that are filled through job postings. And we know this through various research and studies that have been conducted. So when you're looking for jobs, wherever you might be looking on various job boards, that's great. And I encourage you to continue doing that. But just recognize that that's only about 20% of the success rate, which means the other 80% of the pie is something else. We call it the hidden job market. And half of that 80%, a full 40% of that pie, is jobs that are found through people you know, your connections, your networking, your mentors, former professors, former supervisors, neighbors, people in your social circle, your religious community. You never know where it's going to come from. So I often work with colleagues who are not really comfortable with networking or making connections. It can be terrifying for a number of people. Um, when I was in graduate school, I had no idea what networking was or what connecting was all about. And now I consider myself a pretty good networker, and I feel like I've built a solid network. Uh, but just know that it's going to be an important thing for you to start connecting with people. And I've said this for many years, and Avi, you know this to be true as well. As much as we have subject matter expertise in curatorial practice or collections or exhibitions or education, whatever our roles might be in the museum field, at its core, this field is about relationships. And I've said that for many, many years, and maintaining relationships with people over time is really how we move forward in our careers, but also how we maintain robustness in our careers and job satisfaction. The other 40% of that 80% pie, that's people you don't know. That's people you might be referred to from somebody. Somebody says, "Oh, you know, you should talk to is Steve over at whatever museum," um, or people that you reach out to for an informational interview, people you don't know. That can be really terrifying for a lot of people, is reaching out to people you don't know. But my experience in the field is that people are pretty generous. People are pretty generous. I see a couple of heads nodding, which is great. People want to help. I think there was a comment earlier about mentoring and advisement. People really do care about other people in this field. And my personal experience and the experience I've had with a number of colleagues and graduate students that I've taught over the years in various institutions suggests that there is a lot of generosity of spirit, a lot of mentoring and coaching that folks are really willing to do. And of course, you know, this is not a sales pitch, but there are, you know, career coaches. I'm one of the folks in the field who does this for a living. But it doesn't have to be that formal. It can be informal mentoring relationships that you build with people. So all that to say, the 80-20, the pie chart, a big chunk of your job search, and even if you're not searching, just maintaining and building those relationships is really critical. Always has been critical, and now it's even more critical than ever before because of the volatility and uncertainty that we are facing in our field. Um, Whether you're looking for a job or you find yourself out of a job or you're in a job that is not meeting your needs for a variety of reasons, um, there are some things that you can do. I really like to focus on small steps. My dear friend and colleague, Wendy Luke, with whom I co-edited a career handbook a number of years ago, A Life in Museums, that some of you may be familiar with, introduced me to the idea of Kaizen, Kaizen. Um, Roughly, very roughly translated, small change equals big impact. That's borrowed from Japanese industrial manufacturing principles post-war, in which industrial leaders were looking for ways to make small changes in the manufacturing process. Make a small change here that will increase the number of widgets we produce, which increases our profits. So that's very roughly translated. What that means for our careers is you don't have to tackle all of it at once, right? You don't have to try to manage this overwhelming uncertainty and ambiguity about your career, wherever you might be. But making some small changes can make a huge difference. And I sometimes coach clients in these small steps, and very often it starts with some version of self-discovery or reflection, self-reflection, which I think, Avi, you alluded to when you were introducing this program. And I boil that self-discovery down into three key areas. What are your strengths? What are your passions? What are your values? Strengths, passions, and values. If you think, and the reality is that those of us who are working, we often get very busy doing our work, whatever it is, and we don't take the time to reflect on what we bring to our work, right? We're busy doing our programs or planning exhibitions or capital campaigns or whatever it might be, but we don't take the time to reflect on ourselves and what we have to offer. Um, and oversimplified, what you're good at. It might be that you're really good at managing data, or you're really good at uh, working with children, or you're really good at graphic design. There's a whole range of things that you might be really good at, both in your professional life and in your personal life, right? I have a number of professional skills that I bring to the table, but I really love gardening, and um, I love cooking, even though I'm not very good at recipes. I'm not a recipe follower, but I am great at creating magic food, right? So that idea of problem solving and seeing what's in the cabinet and the refrigerator and the freezer, I can pull that together and make a great meal, right? That translates into my professional life as well. So when you're thinking about the things you bring to the table, your strengths, don't just focus on the work related things, right? Think about who you are as a human being. Because after all, those of us who've come into this field, we bring ourselves to this, our unique skills and areas of interest. Our passions, huge, right? We don't often talk about passions in our work, but I would argue that most of us come to this field because we're passionate about something, right? We're passionate about art or history or trees or whales or learning or making the world a better place, all kinds of things we might be passionate about. So getting clear about what those things are for yourself, making a list of the things you're good at and the things you're passionate about. And then I like to focus on values, right? What we value about ourselves, right? I value honesty and integrity and rolling up your sleeves and getting it done, right? Whatever you need to do, get it done, which I think a lot of museum folks do, right? But I also value working in a place and working with people who value that component. I'm a creative thinker, right? I'm sort of, hey, I got an idea. You got a barn and we've got some costumes. Let's put on a show. That's my value system. I want to work in a place that values that. And I've worked in places that value that, and I've also worked for people who do not value that. And it can be night and day in terms of how you feel about your career and where you work and the kind of work you do. Um, the closing message there is, if you're not doing work that you're good at or growing at, if you're not doing work that you're passionate about, and you're not doing work that is part of who you are, your values, and in a place that values who you are and what you bring to the table, then you shouldn't be doing that work. You need to be doing something else. All right. So I'm going to get off my pulpit there for a moment, but I just think that's so important, that self-discovery component that we don't often take the time to think about. Um, I mentioned earlier that, uh, in a previous life, I was the director of professional development at AAM. When I landed that, I came to the museum field as a museum educator, and that was what I did for a number of years. And then I found myself heading up the professional development program at AAM. And that's actually where I built a very robust network of folks, some of whom are in this Zoom call right now. Which makes me very happy. Um, and I felt like I landed at the mothership, right? So for me, that was kind of like, wow, I landed at the mothership. This is my dream job. And for many years, I got to do what I'm good at, what I'm passionate about, and worked in a place that valued that work. Not always at the end, which is why my position was eliminated after 10 years. Um, I won't go into that, but it was pretty devastating for me. But what it did prompt me to do is to find my own career coach, right? That was part of my severance package, which was great. Um, and my coach, the point of this story, my coach introduced me to a number of ideas and concepts that stuck with me all these years later, that I share with my clients a lot. And one of them is, nothing is forever. You think it's going to be forever, that you're the dream job, the mothership, the thing that you went to school for and, paying off your student loan for however long for. But guess what? Nothing is forever. Because we live in this volatile, uncertain world, we just have to be comfortable with nothing is forever, not the thing that you thought was going to be forever. And then something happens, right? And it gets taken away from you. So just acknowledge that nothing is forever. After I lost my job, I thought I'm never going to find a job again. Well, that isn't true. And some of you might be feeling like that. So just realize nothing is forever, not the good stuff, not the bad stuff. Another key thing that my coach helped me understand is the power of and. The power of and. I remember sitting down with a notepad with my coach and drawing out, well, I could go work in another association. I could go back and work in a museum. I could go work in the nonprofit sector. I could teach in a university. I could hang out my own shingle and become an independent contractor. All kinds of things. And she said, yes, you could do all of those, any of those things. But think about and. You can start your own business and you can teach at a university and you can volunteer in your community and you continue your job search for whatever. And it was really powerful for me to shift my mind away from having to find the place to go to and instead thinking about, wow, I can actually do this and that. And as it turned out, um, I started teaching adjunct at a university in New Jersey a few months after my position was eliminated. And I started my own career coaching practice. And I started work on my next book. And I started volunteering in our community garden down the street, where somehow now I'm in charge of all the volunteers and all the programming and planting of bulbs and such, which satisfies my need to be in charge of everything. So the point here is, and if you're in a place of decision making, trying to think about this or that, things don't have to be this or that. Things can be and. And if you find yourself in a position in your work where things are not going well, and I deal with a lot of clients who are struggling with this, find something else that's going to satisfy you to help minimize some of the anxiety that you might be facing. That doesn't mean that you don't need to leave. Maybe you do, but find someplace else that brings you joy and satisfaction, so that all of the anxiety eggs aren't in that basket. Um, and you never know where and is going to take you. For example, when I started adjuncting at that university, it turned out that a full-time position was open, and so I applied for it, and I got that, and that's what I did for the next number of years, um, which then put me in a different career path. So you never know. The last thing I want to say, and then I'll stop talking and we'll have a conversation. Um, and that is the power of saying thank you, the power of gratitude. I know it seems a little like uh, touchy feely, but there is great power in saying thank you and appreciating others, and having people say thank you to you. Um, there's many studies that show that by expressing gratitude and receiving gratitude, it helps elevate our psyche in very physical ways. So if you find yourself in a situation where you find yourself being negative and overwhelmed, and people are making you cranky at work, or you've got a coworker who's underperforming, or whatever it is, um, just say thank you. Doesn't mean inauthentically, but say thank you. Express some gratitude, because it goes a long way. And that sense of empathy and kindness and patience, especially in this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world we live in, very divided on so many levels. Just being more patient and empathetic and kind and expressing gratitude can go a long way. So I just unloaded a whole bunch of ideas for you, from this uncertain world we live in, stages of grief, reality check about job search, small things you can do, power of and, power of gratitude. I have lots more I could talk about, but I'm going to stop talking for a moment and see what you all have to say, and we'll extend some conversation.
Great. Greg, thank you very much. This is wonderful. Honestly, I wish that I had had you in my life 50 years ago. I'm sure my career path would have been a lot smoother and less bumpy than, in fact, it was in practice. Um, the floor is open for questions and comments. If you will hit the raised hand signal, we will be happy to drop you into a queue. I do have a question of my own in this, and that is that one trend in the field that has really struck me forcibly over the last 5 years, particularly since COVID, but even before then, is the growth in the number of museum professionals who are independent consultants and contractors rather than staff members at museums. When COVID hit, of course, a lot of people were literally put on furlough or fired summarily, and the number of independent museum professionals increased radically at that moment. But what I've discovered is that almost everybody who's ever worked for a reasonable length of time in a staff position has done consulting, and almost every consultant I've met in the field has done staff time. So, any comments about where you see the direction going?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, there are a number of folks in this program today who have who I know are consultants, and a couple of them have been my clients, working with them to think through what this means to go from being a working professional in an institution to being an independent consultant of whatever variety, whether it's education or strategic planning. For myself, I'm an independent consultant. That's what I do. I set up my own business a number of years ago after 20-ish years in the museum field, working in institutions. Um, this is another one of the things that my coach helped me figure out. And a couple of you folks in the audience might remember I drew out this. She said, "Okay, you want to be a coach? What does that look like?" And I said, "Well, she said, well, you need to come up with a business plan, and not a business plan. Like, I mean, you could Google how to create a business plan as a consultant, right? There's a really great book uh, out that was edited a couple of years ago called Museum Mercenary. That's basically a handbook on how to be a museum consultant. It's really great if you are interested in doing that. Museum Mercenary is the name of it. But the key points to that are, what do you have to offer? Who's it for? Who are your clients? Why is it needed? What do your services look like? How much are you going to charge for it? And then a timeline. And for me, what that looked like, just because I'm an example, right? Um, I had 20 years of experience in the museum field. A number of those years spent working in career-related work, Career Café at the AAM Annual Meeting, career workshops and career labs, career book. So I had a lot to say about careers. I'm good at it. I'm passionate about it. It's something that I value. And I determined early on that it was something that people in the museum field needed. And as it turns out, that's true. Um, and my clients were people that I identified that were either mid-career professionals, senior career professionals looking to make a transition, or emerging professionals, folks right out of school and such, who were trying to make their way. So I figured out what I had to offer, who it was for, why it was needed, and then I had to do a little sniffing around about what my services would be, whether it would be, one-on-one coaching, workshops, a webinar series, all of that. I remember making out a whole list of all the services I was going to provide, some of which I do and some of which I do not, just for a variety of reasons. Figuring out how much it's going to cost, uh, what the for-profit sector will bear is much different than what museums are going to be, museum folks can pay. So I know that to be true. A timeline, I remember writing down, okay, in 3 months, I'm going to figure out what I'm going to offer. I'm going to launch a website and I'm going to get going. And then in 6 months, I'm going to take a measure of it and see how it works. And then in a year, if it doesn't work, great. At least I tried it. In my case, it turned out that, yeah, it actually is going okay. So yeah, so that's my assessment of folks who want to be a consultant. If that's what you want to do, figure out what you have to offer, who it's for, why it's needed, what the services look like, and what you're going to charge for it, and then a timeline for doing it.
Excellent advice. BJ, I'll get to you in 1 second. Greg, I have one question. You named your independent museum professional business Purple Cow Consulting. There's got to be a story there.
There is a story, and it's actually on my website, by the way, purplecowcareers.com. But the short story is, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to call my career coaching practice, I happened to be sitting at our kitchen table, and on the shelf next to the kitchen table is a set of ceramic purple cows that my mom bought her mom as a Mother's Day present in 1945. So I'm a history geek and I'm super sentimental. And I'm sitting there struggling with what I'm going to call it. And there were these purple cows, literally at eye level, staring at me. And I thought, oh, purple cows are very unique. You know, they stand out from all the other cows. Um, and that's how I started my company. And that became my tagline, helping you stand out in your field. So that's the story of the purple cows. And
Lovely.
you can go to my website and there's the cows and there's a picture of my mom in 1945. It's um again, I'm very sentimental. And yesterday was my mom's birthday, so
Ah,
she's very proud of me.
you weren't kidding about bringing everything every part of your life into the consideration, and there's a perfect example of it. BJ, you're on.
Thank you. I have a I have a question, but also I have a couple comments real quick. One is I had put something in the chat about mentoring. I think all museums, nonprofits, and cultural institutions need to do a better job of mentoring, especially new employees when they first come on, even if they have experience, and especially first time, straight out of college or graduate program. I think that's a big failing in the industry, and I think that needs to be addressed. The other thing is some tips that I would like to offer everyone. First of all, make sure you get everything in writing. If you're talking to someone about a job, or if you're internally talking with someone about a change of your position or a promotion or anything, whatever it is, get it in writing. The other thing that is related to that is, again, most people in their working career, I would describe as more of a roller coaster. You have great ups and some very low lows, and that's why you need to document everything. If you're having problems with a colleague, or if you're getting kind of weird emails from someone you work with, again, print those out, put them in a file, document. Um, if you're getting great notices from a director or colleagues, or you had a successful exhibit opening, again, don't leave them on your computer, print them out, put them in a file. But again, just kind of document stuff so that you can bring all of that. One, the good stuff. So if you're looking for work, or if you're looking to um, for a promotion or some other position in the institution, you've got all that good material. And then for the bad material, um, a lot of times, especially HR may look at the supervisors as sort of the definitive word and not really the person being supervised. So again, being having all that information and sort of documenting your trials and tribulations is also important.
Yeah, BJ, thank you so much for all of those points. I couldn't agree with you more about mentoring and how important it is and how we haven't always done a great job of it. My experience is that, to your point, I have had several great mentors over time, but it only came about because of me being proactive, right? I had to be really proactive about it. So that would be my advice to anybody. And not just networking, and because you got to find a job, but building relationships, being on a panel with somebody for a conference, co-writing a newsletter article, whatever. Sharing expertise and perspective is critical. So that's a great point. Also, a great point about documenting, both in terms of your performance review and your supervise, any of that. What I can tell you, and I didn't talk about this earlier, another small step, but not a small step, is take some time to work on your resume, even if you're not looking for a job, right? Take some time to update your LinkedIn profile. And all that documentation that you just described, BJ, that successful project or that program that reached 300 people, or that capital campaign that raised $1 million, whatever the thing is, right? You have to document it, not just for the sake of your annual performance review, which is pretty common, but when you have to hunker down and start looking for a job, and you're scratching your head because you can't remember all the things that you accomplished in the last 5 years of your job, um, documenting is really critical. And I spend a lot of time with folks on their resumes, doing that very thing, right? What are those accomplishments? Because that's what people are looking for. Um, Not just what you did, but the result of what you did, right? Reached 1,000 people, produced 150 programs, raised $1.5 million, whatever the thing is, right? That documentation is part of who you are professionally within your work, but then how you communicate outwardly as you're looking for something else in your career.
Great. Thank you for the question. Thanks, Greg. Amy?
Hello. Hey, Greg. It's so great
Hey,
to
Amy.
you. Hey, I've known Greg. I think I was doing the math a couple minutes ago. It's like 2 decades or something
I
like
know.
it's been a while. I can't believe it's been about 10 years since we worked together through AAM, and I was chair of the PR and marketing network. I moved from museums about 10 years ago into higher education when I was at Yale University. I'm now at the University of Rochester. Shout out to the Memorial Art Gallery, which is amazing. So I'm still in higher ed, but I have felt a pull to return to museum work again. But it feels really risky, right? More so than ever, even if I've sort of played with this idea before, because there is so much uncertainty. And I really appreciate the lens you opened with. So I'm wondering if you've worked with people on like their tolerance for that risk, or how do you start to think about, oh God, is this just a time to keep your head down and not do anything risky? Or maybe it's those initial phases of like passion, values, ability, but how do you think about it?
Yeah, Amy, thanks a lot. And of course, it's great to see you again. I have a lot of thoughts about it. Um, my first reaction is now's probably not the time to make a risky change
Mm-hmm.
um, in a already volatile world and in a field that's a little uncertain. But what
Yeah.
is right? Higher ed's crazy
Yeah.
and volatile. The cultural sector is crazy and volatile.
Yeah.
You name it, right? Every part of it. So that would be my first recommendation is just, lay low, do great work. But thinking about the right, you can continue doing that and start exploring what would it look like for you to return to museums, the field where you spent a good chunk of years that you really care about, right? Not that you don't care about higher ed, but
Right, right, right.
right?
Yeah.
So right? So you're going to continue doing your work and maybe start doing some exploration about what it would look like to step into a PR and marketing role. If that's, I'm assuming that's what you would want to continue doing in a museum, and where would that be? And who are
Mhm.
other people that like the Tim Hallmans of our world
Yeah.
who have been doing this work for a long time. Reconnect with those people
Yeah.
and say, I'm thinking about stepping back into museums. What do you think?
Hmm. That's really
Right?
interesting. And a lot of the experience I've had in higher ed around strategic plans and HR stuff, actually, I was even thinking, is there a deputy director type of art? So, I mean, I'll follow up with you online, but this is really helpful how you're thinking about the and honestly, I really appreciate your very honest, transparent, like maybe now isn't a great time to take a big risk. And obviously everyone needs to decide that for themselves, but I've really been playing that around in my head. So I appreciate you speaking to that in particular. And I
Yeah. And
talk,
the last thing I'll say is to that is sometimes it's external factors, right? Like maybe you're in a position where you have a spouse, a partner, or something that's going to support you, and so that the immediacy or the urgency of that isn't quite so daunting, right?
yeah.
So that can make a difference in your decision making as well.
All right. Thanks so much.
Great. Amy, thank you for the question. Greg for the comment. Laura?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My question is, in this VUCA world that we're in right now, if you're interested in advancing within the museum world, so outside of your department to take on additional leadership, I've been interested in some additional positions. How do you prepare yourself to take on that additional leadership? How can you prepare when you're looking for a title that's outside of your current department?
And thank you for that great question. Are you thinking about within your institution or going elsewhere?
Either or. I have a small museum, so I think there might be more opportunities outside, although I said I'm in the marketing department and I enjoy the position I have now. But I find it's very hard if you are going for a director, an assistant director role. A lot of people won't entertain you unless you already have that title, and I find that to be a barrier.
Yeah. So I may not have the perfect answer for you, but a general rule of thumb is, to move up, you have to move out. Although that's oversimplified. But it has been, if you really wanted to advance up to, say, a deputy director or director level position, it may not happen within your institution. That isn't a hard and fast rule, but just something to consider. So if you're thinking about that, what else is out there? The other part of it is being an advocate for yourself, right? If you have a supervisor who is who you feel comfortable with, letting them know that you really have career aspirations, that you're and finding out what needs to happen so that you might get some stretch assignments or tasked with a particular project or an initiative or a campaign or something that starts to move you into building some skills and expertise that elevates you, right? It's not like you're going to go stepping into this director position, but any supervisor worth their
Okay, I'm sorry.
any
I was
supervisor
gonna
worth
skip it,
their
and I
salt
realized.
is going to be um, should be really supportive of your professional growth. That's how it happens, right? Not everybody has a supervisor like that, but that would be ideal. But then also think about what it means for you to want to step into, let's say it's a director role, right? Let's say that's what you're really thinking about. And maybe it's a director role in a small museum as opposed to, going to the Met or something, right? Um, then start poking around and reaching out to people. This is, where the connecting with people comes into play. This is part of that 80-20 pie, right? Reaching out to people who are directors in small museums and finding out, what is it like to be the director of a small museum? What are the things that you deal with? What are some of the skills and competencies? What are the challenges you face? Firstly, to find out, okay, this is what it's like from the trenches, right? Here's other people telling me. But then deciding, oh, maybe that's not exactly what I wanted to do after all. Or, oh yeah, this is exactly what I want to do. I can tell you that folks who are heading up small institutions wear many hats. They wear, I mean, we all wear many hats anyway, but folks who are directors or heading up smaller institutions, they'll tell you that, yeah, it's a day to day. Which hat am I wearing today, or which hat am I wearing this morning, and which hat am I wearing in the afternoon? So, yeah, I would start reaching out and exploring outside your institution just to find out what leadership looks like to get a perspective on it. But then advocating for yourself within your institution so that you can start building some skills through stretch assignments or such.
Yeah, I thought about what you were saying in the and opportunity. So maybe there's something to be, present at a conference or something like that, or working on a project outside of the scope of my work.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Greg. Thank you for the answer. Greg, one of the things that is striking to me is that virtually all of the professionals that I know in and out of the museum field are doing something different with their careers than they started out doing. And therefore, we tend to sometimes think very narrowly about what our skill set actually is and what interests us. So somebody might be a collections manager. Well, it turns out that collections managers are terrific at managing information of all kinds. If they thought more broadly about their capacity as information managers, their market might expand rather than narrow. Do you have any thoughts about this whole business about people needing to be, you've mentioned flexibility, but in point of fact, people really are doing very different things 10 years out than they started out doing?
Yeah, it's a great question, Avi, and as with most things, I have a lot to say. Uh, I'm not doing anything like what I thought I was going to do when I came to the museum field. My undergraduate degree is in theater design. I still do a little theater design for a small children's company here in New York City, just to keep my feet in the water because I still love it. But I came to the museum field as a career change. I was going to be a museum educator, which I did for a number of years in a variety of institutions. And then a pivot happened when I got my job in professional development at AAM, which was education, but not museum education in that sense, right? So that was a pivot. And then a pivot into higher education, directing a graduate program, and then a pivot into career coaching. So, my story is pretty typical of a lot of people who have taken a meandering path. Um, when I talk with younger colleagues, graduate students, folks, this isn't about age at all. It's just sort of about stepping into the field. Some people really just want to work in an art museum. Some people just really want to work at the Met. Some people really want to be the curator at the Met, which is all great, right? Um, but that may not happen. So if you can't be the curator of medieval whatever at the Met, where else can you do it? I thought for sure I had a theater degree and I taught art at an elementary school for 10 years. I thought for sure that when I came into the museum field, I was going to work in an art museum. And guess what? I've never worked in an art museum in my career. I worked at the Air and Space Museum. I worked at the Army Museum. I worked at the Building Museum. I've never worked in an art museum, and my career hasn't really suffered. So being open and flexible, I mean, truly, this is where flexibility and adaptability comes in. Um, my first job at Air and Space Museum was amazing. I got to roll my discovery cart out into the galleries and teach people about living in space and the Wright brothers and the universe. It was amazing. And so it satisfied the history geek part of me, right? I got to stand up in front of a group of people, which was great for me. Um, yeah, so being flexible about what you think you want to do. The other thing, and this kind of goes back to Laura, our discussion just a moment ago. A lot of times people are going to start out in very small institutions, right, where you have to wear a lot of hats. And if you want to learn a whole lot about the museum field, go work in a small museum, right? Where you have to, just by nature, you've got to wear a lot of hats, roll up your sleeves. You're out there setting up the table and chairs for the family program on Saturday, or whatever, right? Yeah, I think you'd be surprised. You'll surprise yourself if you allow yourself to be a little more flexible about what you want to do. That isn't to say that if you are really driven and you really want to work in an art museum, fabulous, then that's what you do. But just the roller coaster, I think, BJ, you talked about the roller coaster, right? You just got to be prepared for the roller coaster.
Great, great. Thank you very much. We're right at the end of the hour now. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. Greg, thank you for these words. I hate to say it, probably an overused word for the wisdom that you have shared with us today. Is very, very much appreciated. I hope that
Thank
all of
you.
you will join us in 2 weeks when Tori Bell will talk about the diploma divide. It's actually a talk about class and how class provides blinders as well as lenses through which we see the world, and particularly the world of our audiences. So I hope that you will join us in 2 weeks for the next Museums and Change program. In the meanwhile, healthy, happy, and productive fall. Take care, everyone.